Get this trash out of here before she embarrasses us all." The words shattered the glittering air of the gala like breaking glass beneath a chandelier. Every head turned toward the young woman in the simple black dress. A silence, sharp and merciless, filled the hall. Charlotte Harrington stood at the center of the Lakeview Art Museum's grand atrium, her pearl satin gown glinting under the warm golden lights, but her voice was ice cold. Beside her, her daughter Sienna held a champagne glass, smiling smugly, while her brother Logan had already raised his phone camera, flashing. Their target was the bewildered young woman standing before them, Maya Bennett. Maya's dress wasn't from any luxury brand. Her hair was neatly tied back her face, calm but quietly assured. She barely had time to react before Charlotte snatched the invitation from her hand and raised it high like a piece of evidence. "Look, everyone, someone thought they could sneak in here with a fake ticket." Laughter rippled through the crowd, small at first, then swelling until it mingled with the elegant music of the gala. Logan aimed his phone at Maya and sneered. A perfect example of someone who thinks she belongs in our world. This is going straight to TikTok tonight. The flash flared, capturing the shock and restraint battling across Maya's face. The invitation was torn in half. The sound of ripping paper rang out like a sentence being passed. The pieces fluttered down to the marble floor light, as ash, heavy as steel. A security guard nearby glanced toward the head of security, Daniel Ruiz. He hesitated. This was the museum's most important event of the year, attended by Chicago's elite, and the order had come directly from the evening's diamond sponsor, the Harrington family. Maya bent down, gathering the torn fragments with trembling hands. Not a single word of protest. Around her the crowd held its breath. A few began recording, eager not to miss the next viral moment of the night. From across the hall, Dr. Laura Chen, the museum director, stood beside event coordinator Olivia Parker, her eyes flickering between Maya and the Harringtons. "Charlotte, maybe we should verify." "No need," Charlotte interrupted coolly. "I've been hosting events like this for 20 years. I know who belongs here." The words froze the air. Maya straightened up and looked directly at Charlotte. She wasn't angry, she wasn't defiant, just calm, so calm that a few onlookers felt a sudden pang of shame in their chests. "I understand," she said softly. "Perhaps it's just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Sienna laughed loudly. "Don't kid yourself. This is a charity gala for people who actually matter. A Target dress, a fake bag, a photocopied invitation. Sweetheart, we're not blind." Laughter rippled again. Camera flashes burst like sparks. Daniel Ruiz stepped forward and murmured to Maya, "Ma'am, I'll need to verify your information. We can go to the office area." No, Charlotte cut in her red lips, curving into a smile of authority. "Everyone here deserves to know who just tried to crash their world. We should handle this publicly." At that moment, Dr. Alicia Morgan, a renowned surgeon, stepped forward, her voice low but firm. "Charlotte, this isn't how you handle a misunderstanding. This young woman hasn't done anything wrong." Charlotte turned, eyes narrowing. "Alicia, perhaps you don't understand what standards mean. Events like this require boundaries, not sympathy." Behind them, Judge Helen Carter, who had presided over hundreds of discrimination cases, frowned. She quietly took out her phone and began recording. Sometimes, she whispered to her husband, "Justice begins with witnessing." Sienna kept streaming her voice, brimming with excitement. "Guys, you won't believe this. A woman just tried to sneak into the biggest gala of the year. Someone should make a movie about her." Comments flashed across her screen. "Oh my God, kick her out already. This is next level cringe." Can't believe security hasn't stepped in yet. Maya stood motionless. She didn't argue, didn't plead. She just drew in a deep, steady breath. In that breath lived humiliation, fear, and something deeper, the restraint of someone who had seen injustice before and learned to smile through it. Daniel leaned toward Dr. Chen and whispered, "We really should stop this." But Laura only shook her head helplessly. "The Harringtons are our main sponsors. We can't afford to lose them." The voices, the laughter, the lights, all of it swirled around Maya, turning her into the unwilling centerpiece of a cruel performance. A guest murmured, "She's so calm, like she doesn't need to prove anything." Another replied, "Maybe because she knows she doesn't stand a chance." In Maya's mind, the world blurred. She heard the clicking of heels, the snapping of cameras, the pounding of her own heartbeat. Yet above the noise, one thought rang clear. If I stay silent, they'll believe I deserved this humiliation. But if I fight back, they'll say, "See, we were right about her." A faint smile crossed her lips, not of amusement, but of understanding. She'd known this game for a long time. She bent down and picked up the final fragment of her invitation, pressing it into her palm, as if holding on to her pride itself. Her gaze lifted and met Logan's lens. For a split second, his camera trembled. He didn't understand why, but something flickered in her eyes. Not shame, not fear, but power. And in that moment, beneath the chandeliers and the watchful eyes of the powerful something invisible began to shift. A quiet current, small but unstoppable, had begun to rise. None of them knew that tonight they were recording the very moment that would bring an entire empire to its knees. Whispers of laughter drifted through the museum hall like a cold wind, sweeping past marble statues. Guests in tuxedos and evening gowns didn't miss a moment, phones raised, cameras, flashing lights flickering like a swarm of curious eyes on the hunt. Logan Harrington adjusted his angle, lowering his voice just enough for the microphone to catch clearly. "You're witnessing the peak of delusion," he said. A girl who thought she could fool the elite. "Welcome to Chicago, baby." Within minutes, the video had over 10,000 views. Comments flooded in. "This is the height of blind confidence. Someone get her out of there. This drama is top tier." Standing beside her brother, Sienna leaned in, her voice silky smooth but edged with venom. "Let's get the part where she apologizes. That's everyone's favorite scene." She turned her camera, her perfect smile, glowing under the chandelier champagne glass, raised like she was toasting to victory. Maya still stood there, surrounded by the most powerful names in Chicago. She looked small but not fragile. Her simple black dress framed her slender figure, and her eyes didn't lower. There were no tears, only silence, a silence so steady that it unsettled more than a few people who couldn't explain why. "Pathetic," someone whispered. "No," another replied. "Worse. She's not reacting. It's like she knows something we don't." Across the room, Dr. Laura Chen fumbled with her tablet, searching for donor codes on the guest list. The system lagged, and the harder she tried, the more her palms began to sweat. Maybe there really is a mistake, she thought. But when she looked at Charlotte, standing firm, her gaze sharp, with unshakable power, Laura froze. Charlotte turned toward the crowd, her aristocratic smile cold and poised. "Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we have a lost guest among us. But don't worry. Lakeview knows how to escort someone out without ruining the atmosphere." A few light chuckles echoed like clinking glasses, brittle and cold. Daniel Ruiz stepped forward. He'd handled security for hundreds of major events, but he had never seen a situation turn into such a spectacle. He lowered his voice. "Miss Bennett, if you come with me, I can help verify your information. The longer you stay, the more they'll record." Maya nodded slightly, but before she could move, Charlotte lifted a hand. "No, let everyone see. Some people need to learn about limits." A deep voice cut through the tension. "Limits or prejudice?" Dr. Alicia. Morgan stepped forward, her eyes unwavering. Beside her, her husband, businessman Walter Green, raised his phone and started recording. Charlotte Alicia said slowly, "I've witnessed discrimination before, but it's tragic to see it happening in an event called charity." "Don't be so dramatic," Alicia Charlotte snapped, her tone sharp. "This isn't about color, it's about class." The words hit the air like a slap. Some guests exchanged glances. A few lowered their glasses. Some quietly stopped recording, but others doubled down, sensing a viral moment. Logan glanced at his screen over 25,000 views. He smirked. "Let them talk. This drama's going viral." Comments exploded again. "She's bringing this on herself." Exactly, some people don't know their place. Maya heard every word, but the sounds felt distant, as if the world had muted itself. Memories surfaced her father's office. Light glowing late into the night, his voice saying, "You don't need to shout to prove your strength. Just don't let anyone take away your dignity." She took a deep breath. Suddenly the entire room became crystal clear, every stare, every lens, every smirk forming an invisible wall around her. And within that wall, Maya stood tall, her hand still clutching the torn invitation. Sienna turned to her brother, her tone dripping with scorn. "Look at her still acting. People like that live off pity." "No," Logan murmured, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "She's not acting. She's waiting for something." His words planted a seed of doubt in the crowd. An older woman among the guests spoke softly. "Has anyone even checked the guest list again?" Charlotte gave a dry laugh. "I already said it, fake invitation. And the proof, it's right there." She pointed to the torn pieces scattered across the floor. Suddenly, Judge Helen Carter's voice rose from the back. "Maybe you're right. Maybe not. But I'm recording this whole thing in case someone needs a reminder about arrogance." Charlotte turned, her tone dripping with contempt. "Helen, you always take the side of the weak, just to be praised as fair." "But I'm not doing that. I'm protecting standards. And I," Helen replied evenly, "am protecting what's right." The air grew heavy. Daniel Ruiz frowned and raised his voice. "Enough. This is no longer a security issue. If this continues, I'll shut down the auction." A sharp laugh sliced through his words. "You wouldn't dare," Charlotte challenged. "My family donated $2 million to this museum. Who do you think has the authority to end this party?" Laura Chen closed her eyes, knowing things had spun out of control. On the stage, the band stopped playing, the silence hanging like a thread about to snap. Then suddenly Maya's phone buzzed. A name glowed on the screen. Dad Ethan Bennett. A few nearby guests caught sight of it and began whispering. Ethan Bennett. As in Bennett Tech. But before anyone could react, Maya declined the call. Charlotte squinted, her voice dripping with disdain. Even her phone is disruptive. "That's enough." "She's right." Someone in the crowd added, "Get her out already." Daniel stepped forward, slowly, sweat gathering at his temples. "Maya, I'm sorry, but unless you can prove." "No need." Charlotte interrupted, her triumphant smile widening. "Allow me." She turned to the crowd, her voice ringing through the microphone of the band sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue tonight's auction, Let's clear up this confusion." Scattered applause followed, some polite, others uneasy. Maya lowered her head slightly. She knew this was no longer about an invitation. It was about the way the entire room was testing her dignity. And in that moment, when everyone thought the humiliation had reached its end, something inside her shifted. Her eyes lifted clear and calm, so composed that Charlotte instinctively stepped back half a pace. Maya spoke, her voice gentle as air but resonating through the hall. "I see now. Tonight isn't a gala. It's a test of character." The crowd froze. Logan stopped recording. Sienna's hand tightened around her glass. A man's voice broke the silence. "She's right." And somewhere among the glittering flashes, a small seed of justice began to sprout, quietly but unstoppable. Maya's voice still lingered in the air, not loud, not dramatic, yet powerful enough to make the entire room fall silent. Even the band stopped playing the violin bow, frozen mid-note, leaving a hollow pause where everyone could hear only their heartbeat and the faint hum of cameras still recording. Charlotte raised an eyebrow, the smile on her lips stiffening. A test of character. "How adorable," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "But sweetheart, this isn't a moral philosophy class. This is the real world where value is measured by wealth, not speeches." Maya didn't respond. Her gaze slid past Charlotte, as if she could see right through the mask of privilege she wore. Her silence was its own verdict. She didn't need to argue, because the truth had already spoken for itself. In the second row, Dr. Alicia Morgan set down her wine's glass and sighed. Then she spoke clearly. "Charlotte, I think you should stop. Excuse me." Charlotte snapped her eyes, sharp as glass. "You're humiliating a young woman simply because you believe you're above her." Alicia continued. "I've seen this before, in the emergency room on hospital boards, and now here. It always starts with one seemingly harmless sentence. She doesn't belong here." The silence spread like slow burning fire. A few guests lowered their eyes, unable to look at one another. Nearby, Judge Helen Carter, her silver hair neatly pinned, pulled out her phone and started recording. "I'm documenting everything she murmured in case justice needs a reminder." Her husband, Walter Green, a seasoned businessman, frowned. "You really plan to do this?" Helen nodded. "If they think status excuses cruelty, this video will be the truth they can't erase." Sienna Harrington forced a laugh, trying to cut through the tension. "Oh, come on, don't make this so serious. It was just a harmless joke. Everyone knows we didn't mean any harm." Dr. Alicia turned to her, calm but steady. "Yes, no one ever means harm. And yet it's the good intentions of the powerful that wound the world the most." Logan swallowed hard. Looking around, he noticed the phones still pointed at Maya, but the crowd's faces no longer glowed with amusement. Some were whispering. Maybe they went too far. Daniel Ruiz, the head of security, stepped forward. His voice was hesitant but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps we should take her to a private room to verify everything. I don't think anyone wants tonight to turn into an internet spectacle." Charlotte spun toward him. "Too late for that, Daniel. The clip's already out." She was right. Logan glanced at his phone, over 42,000 views, 12,000 comments, and climbing fast. His chest tightened as he read the latest comment. "That girl looks familiar. Can someone check who she is?" Meanwhile, Dr. Laura Chen, the museum director, was still hunched over her tablet, re-entering names on the guest list. The cursor blinked. Williams, no. Robinson, no. Bennett. Then it appeared. Bennett Foundation Platinum Sponsor, $100,000 contribution. Laura's heart pounded. She looked up, her voice trembling. Wait, she's on the list. Charlotte gave a dry, humorless laugh. Someone probably used the name of a famous foundation to fake their way in. Kids can print anything in these days. Laura pressed her lips together, feeling the last thread of integrity inside her starting to fray. But when she looked around, all she saw were cautious, fearful eyes. No one dared to side with the truth. In the center of the room, Maya remained silent. Her hands gripped the torn invitation so tightly that the edge of the paper sliced her skin. A small bead of blood welled up dark and red, but she didn't let go. She's still standing there. Doesn't she have any shame? A woman muttered. Maybe because she doesn't understand her place, another replied. The whispers soft as they were cut sharper than knives. And then a man's voice rose above them all, firm, resonant, commanding attention. Walter Green stepped forward, raising the phone that had been recording. Enough. Every one of you should be ashamed. This isn't a charity gala anymore. It's a public execution. Charlotte inhaled sharply, her face flushing red. Mr. Green, you're insulting my family. No, he said, his tone rough but steady. I'm reminding you that power is never a license for cruelty. A single pair of hands began to clap from the back of the hall. Dr. Alicia was the first. Then a few others followed, hesitant at first. But soon more joined. The applause wasn't loud, but it was enough to make Charlotte's hand tighten around her purse strap. Sienna took a small step back for the first time that night, feeling the weight of the phone in her hand. She glanced at the screen. Maya's face was framed in the glow of the chandeliers, calm amid the storm. The light caught her eyes, revealing something extraordinary, gentle but unbreakable. A shiver ran through Sienna's spine. In the nearby seats, a young journalist named Melissa Carter, representing Modern Society Weekly, was live streaming. She whispered into her mic, "We're witnessing something extraordinary at the Lakeview Museum. A guest accused of using a fake invitation, but it seems there's more to this story than anyone thought." The viewer count rose to 8,000. Comments flooded in. "This feels like a movie. Who is the woman in black? Someone check the Bennett Foundation." Charlotte could feel the tide turning. The crowd's eyes were no longer adoring but skeptical. Phones were still streaming, and every lens seemed to press in on her. Her hand trembled. "Logan," she said softly, "turn off the live stream." But Logan shook his head, his mouth dry. I can't, Mom. It's already viral." Then from the back of the hall, a male voice called out deep calm, echoing like a bell. "Miss, someone's calling for you." Everyone turned. A staff member stood there, holding out a phone. On the screen was the name Ethan Bennett. Charlotte arched an eyebrow. That name again. Maya remained still, her eyes closed for a moment. She knew this was the line between humiliation and truth, between prejudice and justice. When she opened her eyes, they shone like a light cutting through darkness. She took a step forward. "Thank you," Maya said to the staffer taking the phone. Then she lifted her head and looked directly at Charlotte Harrington. Her voice was quiet, but each word landed like steel against stone. "I think it's time the person who truly holds power here speaks." The hall fell silent. Charlotte laughed, trying to hide her unease. "Oh, of course. Bring in your powerful friend. I'd love to see who's important enough to save a girl who doesn't know her place." Maya met her gaze, her expression no longer angry, only pitying. "You'll find out soon enough." No one realized it yet, but those words would draw the line that split that night in two. between an old order crumbling and a new one rising. The phone in Maya's hand vibrated softly. The light from the screen illuminated her face, casting a calm yet commanding glow in her eyes. The name flashing on the screen, Dad, Ethan Bennett. A sudden silence fell over the grand hall of the Lakeview Museum. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the young woman in the simple black dress, the same woman who had been the target of mockery only moments ago. Charlotte folded her arms, a half smile playing on her lips. Oh, the legendary father again. I can't wait to hear what he has to say to save his daughter from this humiliation. Her voice grew louder, ensuring the entire room heard every word. Maya said nothing. She accepted the call, and her steady voice carried through the vast marble hall. Hi, Dad. I'm still at the museum. Yes, at Lakeview. I think you should know how the Harrington family treats their guests. Each word landed like an arrow piercing straight through Charlotte's polished arrogance. The room fell completely still. The sounds of shoes, laughter, even breathing seemed to disappear. Which family? Someone whispered. Did she say Harrington? Oh my God, she's calling Ethan Bennett. Dr. Laura Chen looked up suddenly, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through the donor list on her tablet. The words appeared clearly on the glowing screen. Bennett Foundation, Platinum Sponsor, $100,000 contribution. Below it, the logo of Bennett Tech Corporation. Laura felt her blood run cold. She turned sharply to Daniel Ruiz. She's a sponsor. She's Ethan Bennett's daughter. Daniel froze his mouth slightly open. He glanced from Charlotte to Maya, who remained calm, still speaking on the phone. Across the room, Logan Harrington gripped his own phone tightly. His TikTok livestream was still running now, with over 70,000 viewers watching in real time. The comments flooded in. Wait, who's her father? Ethan Bennett, the CEO of Bennett Tech. Oh no, they're finished. Sienna went pale, her lips trembling. Logan, turn it off. Turn it off right now. We can't. If we stop now, everyone will know we're scared. But even as he said it, his hands were shaking. Charlotte tried to steady her voice. Don't be fooled by big names. Anyone can pretend to be a billionaire's daughter for attention. I want proof. Dr. Chen turned toward her, her voice firm and cold. You don't need to wait for proof. I have it right here. She raised the tablet, the bright screen lighting up the hall. Marcus Ethan Bennett, CEO of Bennett Tech, official sponsor of the Lakeview Gala, year 2025. The room exploded into stunned silence. The whispers came next, tumbling one after another. My God, the woman they humiliated is Ethan Bennett's daughter. Bennett Tech is signing a contract with Harrington Industries tomorrow morning. A $750 million deal, right, Charlotte? Felt the air thicken. Her high heels suddenly felt heavy, her throat dry as dust. This is a misunderstanding, she stammered. But Maya was still speaking on the phone, her tone calm yet chilling. Yes, Dad, I'm standing with Charlotte Logan and Sienna Harrington. They've been teaching me a wonderful lesson about social boundaries. You might want to hear it yourself. The crowd went dead silent. Some guests started recording again, but this time not to humiliate Maya, to capture the downfall of the Harrington family. Dr. Chen stepped back, pressing her hand to her forehead. Dear God, I let this happen. Daniel Ruiz swallowed hard and whispered, What do we do now? Charlotte tried to find her composure. Maya, I'm sorry if we misunderstood. We were only what Mrs. Harrington Maya cut her off, her eyes burning like fire. Only judging people by the price of their clothes. or by the color of their skin. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Phones lifted again. Live stream comments flooded the screen. This is karma in real time. Maya Bennett talks like a true CEO. That family is done. Charlotte stumbled back half a step. Sienna began to cry softly. Mum? I didn't know. I didn't know who she was. Logan stood frozen, staring at his phone as messages poured in. Don't delete the video. History is happening right now. At that moment, Dr. Chen's tablet pinged. A new notification flashed. Incoming call. Marcus Ethan Bennett. She froze. Looking up at Maya, she saw the young woman give a slight nod, as if she had already expected this. Gregory Harrington's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He pulled it out, and when he saw the caller ID, Marcus Bennett, urgent, his face drained of color. Charlotte saw it too. Her heart stopped. Don't answer, she cried. Not now, but it was too late. The phone lit up, and Marcus Bennett's deep, commanding voice boomed through the hall speakers. Richard, I'm 3 minutes away from the museum. No one leaves. The entire hall went rigid. Charlotte swayed, grabbing a marble column for support. A guest whispered, He's coming here, in person. Another added, That $750 million deal is over tonight. Maya ended her call, slipped the phone into her clutch, and lifted her chin. The chandelier light caught her eyes, making them shimmer, but her voice was calm and chilling. You've just witnessed a performance, but the next act will be the consequences. No one dared to move. Dr. Alicia Morgan slowly nodded, her voice trembling with emotion. Young lady, you just taught this entire room a lesson every business school should require. Maya bowed her head slightly in gratitude, then turned her gaze back to Charlotte. You were right, she said softly. This is the real world. And the real world has consequences. Her words echoed through the elegant hall of Lakeview, once a symbol of power, now the stage for the collapse of arrogance. Every light, every camera, every person understood a storm was coming, and its name was Ethan Bennett. Outside, the sound of tires screeched to a stop. A line of bodyguards in black suits entered first, and the voice of a security staffer crackled over his radio. Mr. Bennett has arrived. Dr. Laura Chen held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. Charlotte grabbed her husband's hand, her voice shaking. God, Greg, if he cancels the contract, we lose everything. Gregory said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the door, on the tall, imposing figure, now stepping inside, moving with calm, deliberate authority. Maya turned toward him, a faint smile touching her lips. Welcome to the Justice Gala, Dad. The massive glass doors of the Lakeview Art Museum opened with a slow, weighty sound, like time itself splitting a new chapter from the past. No one spoke. No one breathed. Only the sound of footsteps echoed across the marble floor, steady and deliberate, reverberating through the vast hall. Ethan Bennett had arrived. Standing over 6 feet tall, his charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, not a single crease in sight. A Patek Philippe watch glimmered silver under the chandelier's light. But it wasn't his appearance that froze the room, it was his presence. A quiet kind of power, the kind that didn't need to be announced, yet made even those accustomed to commanding others instinctively lower their gaze. Beside him were 2 assistants and a man in a grey suit carrying a leather briefcase, his personal attorney from Bennett Tech. Even the museum's security team took an involuntary step back. Maya stood tall, her eyes meeting her father's. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just a single nod, brief, wordless, and full of understanding. Ethan's gaze swept the room. 200 people, business leaders, politicians, celebrities held their breath. At last, his eyes stopped on the Harrington family, who now stood huddled together, like withered leaves beneath an approaching storm. "Good evening," Ethan said. His voice was low calm, yet it carried like the toll of a bronze bell. "It seems I've arrived just in time to hear some lessons about social boundaries, haven't I?" Charlotte Harrington swallowed hard. A trembling smile stretched across her face, fragile as glass about to crack. "Mr. Bennett, what an honor to have you here. There's been a small misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Ethan repeated softly, and somehow that made the word more terrifying. He turned to Maya. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Maya replied calmly. "Just received a bit of an education in upper-class etiquette." A ripple spread through the crowd. Charlotte's face drained of color. Sienna began to sob quietly. Logan hung his head, the phone still in his hand, the live stream still running, but he didn't have the courage to stop it. Dr. Laura Chen stepped forward, pale and shaken. "Mr. Bennett, I'm so sorry." I had no idea Miss Maya was Ethan, raised a hand to stop her. "Mrs. Chen, I didn't come here to hear apologies. I came to witness how a system treats those it believes don't belong." He turned to Charlotte, his gaze sharp as steel. "And to see if those who call themselves the face of refinement have the courage to face what they've done." The air grew heavy, dense. Charlotte tried to steady her voice. "I was simply following protocol. We couldn't allow entry without verification." "By tearing up an invitation," Ethan interrupted. "By calling my daughter trash." He paused for a beat, his tone darkening. "You know, Mrs. Harrington, the only thing that doesn't belong in this room tonight is cruelty disguised as sophistication." "Doctor." Alicia Morgan nodded gently, her eyes brimming with tears. Judge Helen Carter, who had been quietly recording the scene, whispered, "History is being written right here." Ethan turned to Daniel Ruiz. "You're the head of security." "Correct, yes, sir." "You were ordered to remove my daughter publicly in front of hundreds of people." Daniel lowered his head. "I was following Mrs. Harrington's instructions." Ethan nodded slightly, not in anger, but with the weary understanding of someone who had seen power abused too many times. "Mr. Ruiz," he said, "remember this in any organization. If a command makes you feel like you're stepping on someone's dignity, it's no longer a job, it's complicity." Daniel lifted his head, eyes red. "I understand, sir." Ethan turned to Gregory Harrington, who had been silent from the start. "Gregory, he began tomorrow morning at 9. We're scheduled to sign a contract worth $750 million. I had everything prepared until I learned that your family turned a charity gala into a live broadcast of humiliation and discrimination." Gregory's voice trembled. "Ethan, I didn't know this was happening. Please give me a chance." "A chance?" Ethan's tone softened into something colder. "I once believed that partnering with you was an investment in vision. But it turns out I was investing in inherited arrogance." A murmur spread across the room. Some guests quietly raised their phones, recording what they knew would be tomorrow's headline: "Bennett cancels $750 million deal at gala." Ethan didn't raise his voice, didn't pound the table. He simply spoke his words, light as air, yet heavy as truth. "You know, Gregory, real power isn't about making others afraid. It's about making them reflect." Charlotte broke down, clutching her husband's arm. "Mr. Bennett, please, it was my fault, not Greg's or the children's." "I beg you." Ethan looked at her no longer, angry, just tired. "Mrs. Harrington, The saddest thing about power is when people only learn to use it to look down on others, and forget it can also be used to lift them up. He glanced around the room at the cameras still recording. But perhaps tonight will teach this room exactly that. The air cracked open. Dr. Chen turned away to wipe her tears. Sienna trembled behind her mother. Logan lowered his phone, his face pale as paper. Maya stepped forward beside her father. "Dad," she said softly, "they had the chance to choose kindness. They just didn't use it." Ethan nodded. "And that's why they'll have to start over." He turned to his lawyer. "Notify the board. Effective immediately, the contract is suspended indefinitely." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Charlotte nearly collapsed, clutching her daughter for balance. Gregory shouted, his voice breaking. "Ethan, if you do this, thousands of my employees will lose their jobs. Please reconsider." Ethan met his gaze, his voice firm as steel. "You should have thought of them before you allowed your family to treat another human being like garbage." The words landed like a verdict. No judge, no jury, only truth. Maya stood beside her father, not triumphant, not vengeful, only calm. She turned to the audience and spoke slowly. "The funny thing is, if I hadn't worn this ordinary dress tonight, none of you would have revealed who you truly are. Sometimes, to see a person's heart clearly, you have to let them believe you're not worth their respect." The room fell completely silent. No one dared to applaud, but every gaze followed her. She walked forward, her steps steady beneath the trembling lights. Ethan walked beside her shoulders, straight, the posture of a man closing one era and beginning another. As the two of them stepped through the grand doors, the whispers behind them slowly turned into scattered applause, not for power, but for dignity. And inside the hall, the Harringtons were left in trembling silence, surrounded by hundreds of phones recording the moment they finally understood the storm named Ethan Bennett had swept away everything except the final lesson. That night, Chicago didn't sleep. In less than 2 hours after the glass doors of the Lakeview Art Museum closed behind the Bennetts, the entire city erupted. Social media flooded with short clips, mashups, commentary and live streams, an unprecedented digital storm, repeating the same headline everywhere. The Harrington family humiliates a billionaire's daughter and pays the price at a $750 million gala. On the 58th floor of the Grand Plaza Hotel, Charlotte Harrington sat silent by the window, city lights washing over her ashen face. On the table, her phone buzzed without pause, messages from advisors, from friends, from brands announcing one after another that they would temporarily suspend partnerships. A bold line from the Chicago Ledger blazed across her screen. Bennett cancels contract. Harrington Industries stock plunges 27% in 4 hours. Charlotte gripped the phone, her hand trembling. "We only wanted to teach her a lesson in etiquette," she whispered. But spoken aloud, it sounded like the plea of a defendant who no longer believed herself. Across the room, Sienna sat, collapsed on the floor. Mascara streaked. Her screen flashed non-stop mass unfollow. For Sienna Harrington, 180,000 people in 12 hours. Mocking clips, hashtags like "Number Sienna Scandal" and "Number Trash Talk Queen" swarmed TikTok. She burst into sobs. It was just a joke. Why do they hate me? Charlotte turned away, offering no answer. She knew the world is always eager to witness the fall of those who once stood above. On the other side of the city, Logan Harrington sat in his apartment, his face drained of color. His phone showed more than 3 million views and nearly 800,000 comments. They all said the same thing. This is privilege laid bare. You filmed your family's own verdict. Thanks for the clearest lesson in human dignity." Logan shut the screen and dropped his head to the desk. The room fell into silence, lit only by street lights in the window. He remembered Maya's eyes when she looked into his lens, steady, unafraid, tightening something in his chest. For the first time, he understood she had not been humiliated. He had made himself small. He opened his laptop and logged into TikTok. The cursor hovered for a long time over delete account. Then he changed his mind. He typed a new caption on a black screen. If you've ever filmed someone's pain, ask yourself this: are you recording the truth, or are you slowly killing the mercy in you? He posted it. His first video after the fall. No effects, no filters. Only exhausted eyes crossed more than 200,000 likes within 1 hour. Meanwhile, across the media world, Maya Bennett returned to her father's penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. Night was drenched in light, yet the room felt strangely quiet. Ethan stood at the window gazing down at streets crisscrossing like the city's veins. He spoke without turning. "You know, I've seen a lifetime of meetings and hard-fought negotiations, but I've never heard a silence as frightening as tonight's." Maya set down her bag, her voice soft. Silence can kill when people use it to cover wrongs, but sometimes it is the strongest verdict. Ethan turned, pride and gravity mingling in his eyes. "You were calmer than I imagined. You didn't shout, you didn't prove a thing. That is why they collapsed." "I didn't want them to collapse," Maya replied. "I wanted them to see themselves." He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "Maybe that is the difference between justice and revenge." The next morning, the gates of Harrington Industries were ringed by dozens of reporters. The company sign, once a symbol of Chicago's pride, now served as a backdrop for questions about ethics and entitlement. "Mrs. Harrington, do you have a message for Maya Bennett? Will your family issue a public apology? Is it true Bennett Tech is considering legal action against your firm for discriminatory conduct?" Charlotte said nothing. She knew any words now would only deepen the wound. Behind her, Gregory Harrington fought to steady himself, eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. The stock kept falling. Investors pulled out. Employees across the company panicked. An empire once proud as a tower was cracking floor by floor. Online number Justice for Maya and number Bennett Effect shot straight to the top spot nationwide. A journalist wrote, "In the age of the lens, justice no longer waits for court. It arrives the moment truth is recorded." At noon that day, Maya woke from a night without sleep. Her phone vibrated non-stop. Notifications, emails, interview requests from CNN, from Forbes, even from the United Nations. She opened a message from Dr. Alicia Morgan. "Thank you for reminding us that compassion never goes out of style. Do not stop here." Maya smiled, then stepped onto the balcony. The Chicago sky was a pale gray, the scent of mist mingling with cold air. She drew a long breath and knew she had crossed a threshold from victim to standard bearer. Her phone buzzed again. It was from her father. "Are you ready for the press conference? I think it's time," she replied. That afternoon, the eyes of American media turned to Bennett Tech headquarters. Maya appeared beside her father in a minimalist white blazer. No jewelry, no display, only quiet confidence. Ethan opened the conference. "Last night, my daughter was humiliated, not because she did anything wrong, but because others decided she did not belong. As of today, Bennett Tech commits to turning that humiliation into a movement to change our entire industry." He turned to Maya. "Go ahead." Maya stepped to the podium and looked straight into hundreds of lenses. This story is not just mine. It belongs to everyone who has ever been judged by appearance, by origin, or by the color of their skin. We do not need revenge. We need responsibility. She paused, her voice unhurried but unyielding. Because sometimes the only thing keeping a society from collapse is not the law, but simple respect between human beings. The room erupted in applause. A few reporters rose to their feet. On the live feed, millions watched, and a new hashtag began to spread. Choose dignity. That night, as Chicago settled into quiet, Maya's speech passed more than 30 million views within 24 hours. And in a dim house on the city's north side, Charlotte Harrington sat before a mirror, staring at the hollow reflection, looking back. Her phone's glow lit a new line of text. Ethan Bennett confirms he will reconsider the contract if the Harrington family issues a public apology and implements a corporate culture reform program. Charlotte closed her eyes. She understood that a final chance had opened, but this time not to save money, to save what remained of her character. That morning, the sky over Chicago was covered in a silver-gray haze. In front of Harrington Industries headquarters, hundreds of reporters, cameras, and onlookers crowded the sidewalk. A large sign reading "Press Conference, 10 o'clock a.m." reflected the drizzle falling across the glass doors. When those doors opened, Charlotte Harrington stepped out first. There was no expensive gown, no glittering jewelry, only a plain black suit and a pale, drawn face. Beside her, Gregory, Logan, and Sienna walked in silence. None of them looked toward the cameras. Flashes burst relentlessly. Microphones pointed at them like arrows ready to strike. Charlotte stopped at the podium and took a deep breath. Her voice was hoarse but clear. "I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here to take responsibility." A quiet murmur rippled through the crowd. She continued, her words heavy with remorse. "That night at the Lakeview Museum, I treated a young woman I had never met with cruelty. I tore up her invitation. I humiliated her in front of hundreds of people. And I did it because I believed I had the right. But the truth is, I had nothing but arrogance." She paused, her eyes locking onto the cameras. In that moment, Charlotte Harrington was no longer the powerful socialite of Chicago's elite, but a woman stripped bare, standing face to face with her own wrongdoing. "I apologize to Maya Bennett and to everyone who has ever been treated the way she was. I'm sorry I taught my children that status mattered more than kindness. Today I am the one learning that lesson again." Her voice caught, but it did not shake. Logan and Sienna bowed their heads, eyes glistening. Logan stepped forward, taking the microphone. His voice was low and unsteady. "I was the one who filmed that moment, thinking I was just creating entertainment. But when I watched it again, I realized I had recorded my own cruelty. I won't delete the video. I'll keep it so I never forget who I once was." The press hall fell completely silent. Only the sound of camera shutters filled the air. Then Sienna stepped up, her voice trembling. "I used to live in the illusion that glamour was power. But that night, a girl in a simple dress showed me that true strength is holding your dignity when the world turns against you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to make things right." Charlotte took her daughter's hand. She looked out at the sea of reporters, her voice rough but steady. "We will fulfill every requirement set by Bennett Tech Anti-Bias, training a $10 million fund for social equality initiatives and quarterly cultural audits within our company. This isn't a public relations campaign. It's the beginning of atonement." A journalist called out Mrs. Harrington. Do you think Maya Bennett will forgive you?" Charlotte was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled faintly, weak but sincere. "I don't expect her forgiveness. I only hope that when she sees us again, she knows that her pain was not in vain." Applause broke out, slow, hesitant, but genuine. A few reporters wiped their eyes. The entire square went quiet for several seconds before thousands of people watching the live stream began flooding the screen with hearts and comments. The first apology I've ever believed. The pride that finally learned to kneel. No one is too powerful to relearn how to be human. A few blocks away, inside the Bennett tech office, Maya Bennett sat before a monitor, watching the entire press conference unfold. Not with triumph, but with quiet reflection. As Charlotte bowed her head, Maya whispered to her father, "I think they're finally starting to understand." Ethan nodded, his gaze softening. "And you, Maya, just showed the world that justice isn't about destruction. It's about turning mistakes into lessons." She smiled, her eyes shimmering. "I never wanted them to fall, Dad. I wanted them to rise, but differently." Ethan placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, his voice warm and steady. "The world needs more people like you, because sometimes the greatest form of revenge is making others better." Outside the window, Chicago's lights flickered back to life. No longer the city of hollow ambition, but a place where one story of dignity had rewritten what true power really means. 6 months had passed since that fateful night at the Lakeview Museum. Chicago was now in the heart of autumn golden leaves drifting softly along Michigan Avenue, while the glass facade of the Lakeview Art Museum glowed under the morning sun, once again the nation's center of attention. But today, people weren't here for fashion or charity auctions. They came to witness something far rarer, a family, a corporation, and an entire system reborn. A large banner stood at the entrance, the Bennett-Harrington Corporate Responsibility Summit, 2026. The crowd gathered CEOs, scholars, social activists, journalists, and students. The air carried both dignity and warmth. There was no display of luxury, only a sense of learning and reconciliation. On the main stage, the backdrop displayed the words, "From humiliation to humanity." Charlotte Harrington was the first to walk out. Gone was the arrogance of a woman who once looked down on others. In its place was the calm grace of someone who had fallen deeply and learned to rise by bowing her head. She wore a simple navy blue dress, no diamonds, no designer logos. Her eyes met Maya's seated in the front row beside her father, and for a moment the entire hall fell silent. Charlotte took the microphone, her voice low but steady. 6 months ago, this place was the scene of my greatest humiliation. But today, I stand here again, not to erase the past, but to thank it. Because it was that very moment that taught us the true value of respect. She paused, then looked toward Maya. "Thank you, Maya Bennett. Thank you for not seeking revenge. Thank you for giving us a second chance." Applause rose through the hall, not loud, but full of feeling. Maya nodded gently, a soft smile touching her lips. She understood that not everyone had the courage to face their mistakes before the world. Next, Gregory Harrington took the stage and presented figures on the large LED screen. 6 months ago, 3% of leadership roles were held by people of color. Today, 31%. 12% of executive positions were held by women. Now 47%. 0 minority-owned suppliers. Now 35% of the primary supply chain. His voice trembled slightly, but carried honesty. I once believed that ethics and profit were two separate paths. But when we learned to respect others, our quarterly revenue grew by 18%, productivity rose by 23%, and employee loyalty reached its highest level ever. Hundreds took notes. Cameras panned across the audience. This was no longer a display of remorse, but living proof of transformation. Then it was Logan Harrington's turn. He walked onto the stage, no longer the boy with a phone in his hand, but a man learning to use his voice to make amends. I once thought social media was a game of popularity, but that night I realized every view is an eye staring into your soul. I once used a camera to hurt people. Now I use it to heal. Behind him, the screen lit up with clips from his new series, Privilege Check, where Logan interviewed workers, students, and immigrants about their experiences with prejudice, moments filled with tears, laughter, and horn shakes. The audience rose to their feet in applause. When the clapping quieted, Maya Bennett was invited to the stage. She wore a crisp white suit, walking with the quiet confidence of someone who had found her voice not just for herself, but for millions of others. The lights softened as she spoke. I will never forget that night. But what matters more than the pain is the moment people choose to change. The world doesn't need perfect apologies. The world needs people willing to relearn their humanity. She turned to Charlotte, her tone gentle. I was humiliated in this place, but here too I witnessed the rebirth of courage. That's why I choose to stand with them, not against them. The hall erupted. Applause thundered, lasting more than a full minute. Ethan Bennett, seated in the front row, wiped his eyes. He stood and shook Gregory Harrington's hand, firm, genuine, and heavy with understanding. Forgiveness, Ethan said, is not erasing the wrong, but turning it into a lesson. And today I believe this lesson will echo far beyond numbers and contracts. At the close of the summit, every guest signed a new declaration, the Metropolitan Accord, the corporate pledge of respect and responsibility. 47 major corporations committed to diversity audits, anti-bias training, and contributions to the Community Equality Fund. Outside the museum, the autumn sun poured through the glass, reflecting hundreds of bright faces. No one spoke of the scandal anymore. They spoke of hope, of opportunity, of the rebirth of empathy. Maya stepped onto the terrace, tilting her head toward the Chicago sky. Where once humiliation had hung a heavy light, now filled the air. She smiled softly and whispered, "Sometimes justice doesn't come from a verdict, but from people who choose to change." And in that moment, Lakeview was no longer a museum of the past. It had become a monument to the future, built by compassion. 2 years after the Redemption Summit, the world was no longer the same. From the viral videos and the lessons born at Lakeview, a new movement had emerged. The Metropolitan Model, a framework for human-centered business, now adopted across the United States, spreading to Europe, Africa, and Asia. Forbes called it a moral revolution in business. Time magazine placed Maya Bennett on its cover with the headline, "The Face of Corporate Redemption." Inside the glass conference hall at the United Nations headquarters in Geneva, 193 flags fluttered in unison. At the front, Maya, now 27 years old, Vice President of Social Impact at Bennett Tech, prepared to take the podium. Dressed in a white suit, her expression was calm, her smile gentle, yet resolute. The announcer's voice rang out. Please welcome Maya Bennett, founder of the Choose Dignity movement, to address the United Nations Human Rights Council. The audience rose in applause. Maya bowed her head, then began to speak. 2 years ago, I was humiliated at a gala, not because I did something wrong, but because people believed I didn't belong. But that night I realized something: the world doesn't change through outrage. It changes when we choose dignity over prejudice. Her voice was steady and clear, carrying through the chamber. Behind her, the screen displayed the numbers: 1,247 companies worldwide implementing the metropolitan model, a 34% reduction in discrimination, lawsuits, and an 89% increase in leadership representation from minority groups. These numbers are not just statistics, she said. Each percentage point represents a person, an employee finally seen for their worth, a child gaining access to education, someone once left behind, now stepping forward. She paused her eyes, finding the guests seated in the front, Charlotte and Gregory Harrington. Charlotte, now a cultural diversity advisor for major corporations, her hair silvering her expression, humble. Logan, who now ran the Privilege Check Foundation, bringing empathy education to 200 schools. Sienna, who had left the glamorous world behind to work with the Equal Voices organization, teaching communication skills to minority youth. Maya smiled warmly, her voice soft but powerful. Change doesn't happen when we destroy those who are wrong, but when we give them the chance to become right. The entire hall rose to its feet in a standing ovation. Tears welled in Charlotte's eyes, while Ethan, seated in the front row, looked at his daughter with quiet pride. After the speech, reporters filled the corridor. One called out Miss Bennet. If you could go back to that night, would you want to avoid it? Maya smiled gently. No, because sometimes the humiliation we endure is the price we pay for a kinder world. As she stepped outside the building, hundreds of young people surrounded her, holding signs high above their heads. Choose dignity. Respect is power. We belong everywhere. A soft wind swept through, lifting a white banner that bore the logo of the Bennett-Harrington Accord. Maya looked up at the clear European sky, the sunlight reflecting in her eyes like the shimmer of a new beginning. Justice, she whispered, doesn't end with a verdict. It begins when we learn to see each other with new eyes. And in that moment, no one remembered the night of humiliation anymore. They only remembered that from one act of courage, a new world had begun. The autumn night in Chicago was quiet. On the top floor of the Bennett Tech headquarters, the lights were still on. Ethan Bennett stood by the glass window, a cup of coffee in hand, gazing down at the city shimmering like an endless river of light. Behind him came the soft sound of typing. Maya was finishing the final report for the Global Equity Fund, a $50 million investment initiative for young entrepreneurs from underrepresented communities. Ethan turned, a faint smile touching his lips. You're working late again. The whole world is talking about your speech in Geneva, and here you are, still focused like a first-year student. Maya smiled. A speech is only a wave, Dad. Real change begins with the work we do every day. He nodded, his eyes filled with pride and quiet reflection. You know that night at Lakeview when I saw them surround you, I thought justice could only come through power. But you showed me something stronger than power, compassion. Maya paused, her voice soft but firm. I never wanted them to fall, Dad. I wanted to prove that respect can redefine power. That's the only way the world won't repeat the same mistakes. Ethan smiled, then handed her a small card, its edges slightly yellowed with time. Do you remember this? Maya's eyes widened in surprise. It was the torn invitation from that night, now restored, pressed between glass, pieced together from countless fragments. I had it repaired, Ethan said. Not to forget the past, but to remember that from the most broken things, we can still rebuild something beautiful. Maya placed her hand gently on the frame, her voice trembling. What was once called trash is now proof that dignity can survive even the deepest wounds. Father and daughter stood in silence, gazing at the card, a symbol of both beginning and rebirth. The next morning, Chicago awoke to a new day. Across the city's billboards, headlines scrolled, "The Metropolitan Accord, officially signed by 72 nations." Beneath it was an image of Maya shaking hands with United Nations representatives. In the city's South District, a new sign had been raised, Harrington Center for Diversity and Innovation. Charlotte, now serving as honorary director, welcomed the first group of students entering a free program on human-centered leadership. On the wall hung a framed photograph, Charlotte shaking hands with Maya at the Lakeview Summit. Below it, engraved in steel, were the words, "No one is too high to bow their head and learn to be human again." That evening, Maya returned to her apartment, overlooking Lake Michigan. She sat on the balcony, watching city lights ripple across the water. A notification lit up her phone, an email from Logan. "Maya, today, our Privilege Check Center opened its 50th class. It all began with a video I was once ashamed of. Thank you for not erasing us from the story." Maya smiled, her gaze drifting toward the lake. She whispered, "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about believing people can be better than they were yesterday." The night breeze brushed past, cool and gentle. Beneath that same sky, a city that had once witnessed humiliation now stood as a symbol of redemption and renewal. Maya looked up, her eyes glowing like a lantern in the dark. "If there's one thing I've learned," she said softly, "it's that true power isn't in making others bow, but in helping them rise." And in that moment, as all the city's lights converged, the story of Maya Bennett came to a close, not with applause, but with the silence of a world learning once more how to believe in compassion. From the perspective of an expert in ethics and leadership culture, the story of Maya Bennett is not merely a journey of restoring dignity, but a timeless reminder that compassion can redefine power. In a world where status and wealth often overshadow humanity, Maya reminds us that true strength does not lie in defeating others, but in inspiring them to become better. When compassion is placed above pride and respect, above privilege, society begins to change, not through outrage, but through awakening. If you believe that dignity remains the ultimate measure of humanity, please like and subscribe to help spread stories of courage and kindness. And before you leave, share your belief in the comments with these words: "Keep your dignity."